Okay, let's get started here. Good evening from the McNeil Room in the Rensselaer Union. I'm Sonny Sen with the RPI Debate Club, and I welcome you to the 2016 CDTA Grand Marshal and President of the Union debate. We have two candidates for the position of Grand Marshal, Paula Laurie and Dan Rogers, and four candidates for President of the Union, Keegan Caraway, Shannon Gillespie-McComb, Chip Kircher, and Liam Maganini. This debate is hosted by RPI TV and generously sponsored by the Capital District Transportation Authority. So starting with the Grand Marshal debate, I'll quickly describe the format. We will begin with a 3-minute introduction from each of our candidates. During the remainder of the debate, I'll ask questions to each of our candidates. Aside from audience questions, which will be at the end, all questions must go through the moderator, which is me. We will limit each candidate to 60-second answers for each of their responses. I'll apologize up front, but I won't hesitate to cut you off after 60 seconds. I'll say time or something of the sort. There will be no rebuttals in this debate for the sake of time. During the second portion of the debate, we will allow audience members to ask questions to the candidates directly. Just please keep your questions appropriate. Finally, at the conclusion of the debate, each candidate will be given 3 minutes for a closing statement. RPI TV would like to thank UPAC Sound, UPAC Lights, and all those who volunteered to make this event possible. With that, let's get started. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our Grand Marshal candidates to the stage. Okay, thank both of you gentlemen. We used the magical website of random.org to decide which one of you will be going first, and they decided that it will be Dan. So after each question, the order will flip just to sort of keep it a little bit more fair. So whenever you two are ready, Dan, you can begin with your opening statement.
Hi guys, I'm Dan Rogers. I'm running for Grand Marshal this year, and I'm running because I feel as though my leadership positions in the past can greatly affect the current student senate, as well as increase relationships between the student government and the administration. So right now I'm running off of 3 particular platforms, which is effective continuation of the current projects that are going on with Senate committees, more proactive communication between the student government officials, between the Institute, and finally instilling a more stronger sense of academic integrity as well as continuation of important foundations of the academics. We're here to get grades, we're here to get jobs, and I feel as though there are many policies that could be strengthened that can help us do so.
Okay, thank you. Paul, you're up.
Hello, good evening everybody. Debate Club, thanks for setting up this event, and thanks to RPI TV and everybody who's helping film and set up the lights. To get to it, I'm Paula Laurie. I am the former Rules and Elections Committee Chair. I'm the current Senate Student Life Committee Chair, and I'm one of the class of 2017 senators, and I would like to be the next Grand Marshal at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I believe that the experience which I've had in the past on Senate, serving since my freshman year, will allow me to hit the ground running and effectively address issues that the student body is facing and potential ones they could face, as well as helping to ensure that projects to improve the school and to improve student life on campus will be able to be addressed effectively during my term. I have several ideas to help increase the outreach of the Senate, which have been proven during my time on Senate, both through my committee and through work that I've seen now on other committees and through their different leaders and different things that I've seen that will help not only increase the Senate's membership, but ensure the new members that we bring in are students who are dedicated to help to projects and ideas that they would like to have carried out and have investment in helping improve the student experience at Rensselaer. Further, I have a track record of active work and active results which I've gotten for the students at the school. As Rules and Elections Committee Chair, I helped institute electronic voting at the school. As Student Life Committee Chair, I've completed projects on a range of topics ranging from ensuring permanent funding for a mall shuttle to changes to the school's inclement weather policy. So for these three reasons, I believe I'm the best candidate to become the next Grand Marshal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that being done, we'll move on to the question and answer period. So the first question is, what does being Grand Marshal mean to you? And we'll start with Paul.
So, to me, being Grand Marshal begins with the reason the Office of Grand Marshal was started in the 1800s, which was to recognize a student who left RPI to go fight in the Civil War and came back to finish his education. It represents leadership, dedication, and setting an example that you would like others to follow. It represents going out of your way to help others and trying to improve the student life and all aspects of the Rensselaer community in every way you can. So, as leader of the Senate, as the Grand Marshal has become, and the student body president, I believe the Marshal acts to represent students' ideas, voices, and concerns to the administration and help working and directing those concerns and ideas to tangible results to help improve the student experience at Rensselaer.
Thank you. Dan, same question for you.
So Grand Marshal means, to me personally, someone who is willing to take on the leadership role between student government and administration, someone who will act as an effective liaison between the student body and student government. This is the biggest issue as of right now. I feel as though the GM needs to represent the student body in a more collective way rather than just pertaining to each individual Senate member. Each Senate member, in my personal opinion, does not represent enough of the student body as it should. So the Grand Marshal should be a public figure, highly respected, who is a very strong leader, who's willing to go out of their way and try to meet as much of the student body as possible in order to give them their part in student government as each one has earned it. Also, GM, in my opinion, is the strongest leader of student government, and they need to keep everything in check, in order, and make sure that the projects that are undergoing get completed, as well as the goals that they establish get completed.
Thank you. So the next question will be individual questions related to your opening statements. Dan, you talked about how you wanted proactive communication and academic integrity. Can you give me some specific ways how you plan to accomplish this?
So I want proactive communication by developing a relationship between the student government and the administration. This is what's lacking right now. Too many bridges have been burned, as well as just an overall lack of reaching out. They say that it needs to be a two-way road for communication. Right now it's a zero-way road, in my opinion. If it takes us to reach out first to administration, to be active in their plans and ongoing thoughts, positions, everything, we need to build our relationship with them back. I want to do this through reinstating a certain pizza with the president idea, where we have luncheons with administration that they say they're too busy to come talk to us face to face. Well, I say everyone eats lunch, and I believe that they would not mind giving that time out of their day to come talk to the people that they're trying to help out and represent.
Okay, thank you. And similarly, Paul, a question relating to your opening statement. You said you wanted to increase senator involvement and get them working on projects that they're interested in. Can you give me some specific ways that you plan to do this?
So some of the ways that I plan to do this relate to things that I've implemented previously when being a committee chair, which typically at the beginning of the year we'll work with brainstorming and generate just different ideas based off of what concerns different members of committees have heard of, what concerns that we've gotten in feedback to different surveys, and just different issues that we know have been ongoing at the school. And we build what projects we choose to work on off of not only what's feasible that we think we'll be able to work on, but what people are most interested in and want to work on, to try to work on building our project groups that way, since letting people actively choose what they want to do and have investment into accomplishing goals typically helps them to be more effective in their work and give them extra motivation to ensure that their goals and things that they're working on end up getting met and accomplished on time.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what do you feel are the 3 greatest issues facing our student body, and briefly describe how you plan to address them? So we'll start with Paul.
I believe the three greatest issues facing the student body currently are the uncertain future of the Rensselaer Union and its oversight, the communication between student government and its using all of the tools it has at its disposal most effectively, and also the start of summer arch and planning for that. To begin with those in order, the way I would work on addressing the situation with the union's oversight would be to work on with Marcus and Nick on transitioning the work that they've done so far, getting the documents and things they've been working on so that I'll be able to get a complete understanding of what's gone on in their meetings and where we are with the Board of Trustees and other institute administrators. The next thing I would do with that is ask for, in certain terms, exactly what, if it's installed, the executive director of student activities would do in their role, who they would report to, and all of what their job would be, so we can finally get definitive answers on how they would be affecting the union, as well as Greek life and other aspects of student life. In terms of student government communication between student government and students, I would work to start using the different tools we have at our disposal, like our website, the message board we have in the union, and other things which we don't use that effectively currently or at all, more frequently reinstating something Kyle, one of the former Grand Marshals, had, where he had a schedule of mandatory posts every so often on social media by different Senate committees, so people would know that if I want to know what this committee is working on, I should go here to look at it. As well, with the administration, I would work on that by installing a plan that I used within my own committee, where every so often we would just send certain institute vice presidents updates on this is what we've done so far, this is where we are with it, so that they'll always know what we're working on, and we got a lot of feedback from them, which was useful, which they incorporated some of their ideas in our projects and some of our ideas in theirs. In terms of the third, the summer arch ties into communication, where we need to work more with the administration on setting up more venues for students to not only gain access to information on decisions that have already been made regarding summer arch, but also allow them to ask questions so that we'll be able to work with them to build the strongest program possible to make sure that it's implemented as effectively as it can be for its first few pilots, and then especially for when it becomes mandatory to all students.
Thank you. Dan, same question. As you may have noticed, I gave Paul a little more time to elaborate, as I feel it's an important question. So feel free to elaborate. Yeah.
Thank you. I was gonna inquire about that. Anyway, so the three main issues that I see the student union facing as soon as a new GM is being elected would be the unfilled positions right now that are putting more of a workload on the student government, which include Greek dean, which include director of the union. We're starting to lose positions, and we're not getting them hired in an effective manner, nor are we having basically an interim position for this. So we're overloading administration right now. Sorry, that's one. Next one would be our academic affairs committee is doing everything they can based on research, everything, but right now we need more action. I feel as though we do not have enough emphasis on help right now. Not many people know that you can even get free tutors through ALAC. Little things like that. So we need to spread information about more effective spread of information to help others right now in their academic issues and promote, well, academics more, I believe. And finally, summer arch, we're going to start having an increasing student body over summer where there normally isn't that great of one. So if they're paying activities fees, they need to be represented through the normal clubs that are going on, and that's going to be a huge issue. You can't have every single club running. That's under more PU, but we also have to make sure that there is a representation of the student body over summer arch when there usually wouldn't be if it was normal summer classes. So with that, we have to institute liaisons voluntarily and try and take some students who volunteer for the preliminary summer arch under our wing in student government so they already know what is going on. Because if you get volunteers who want to basically serve as a pseudo-senate over summer, they're not going to have any idea of what's going on unless we get them going right now. They need to have an understanding of the foundations of student senate and the issues that they pose. So going through that again, basically how I would address each one. Unfilled positions, I would work tirelessly to try and get interim director of the union and try and inquire on the current status of hiring processes, because I feel as though this is not a driven through issue. Obviously, we have the current issue that ties into it as well, which stems from everything, the executive director of the union. So this is the biggest issue that the student union faces, that we need to continue to show that the student body cares. We need to show that people are interested, they care about our tradition, and they want to keep it going. And I want to do this by giving people more information. We thrive off information. The more information we have, the more knowledge we are, the better we can fight against, and some people thinks is it's against our Constitution. You know? So we don't want to be wronged. We don't want to feel as though we're being wronged. And the best step is to make sure that everyone's informed. I would want to have bi-monthly forums where the student senate, chair committees can basically just talk to the students and be more involved, similar to a forum that we had with Dr. Ross, where we can spread information more effectively. And finally, with academic affairs, what I would want to do is basically try and implement a big brother, little brother system that we have in many other schools, like a more effective mentoring program. Because I feel as though if I had a mentor starting off, I would be doing a little better in classes. Someone who can guide the way, someone who can give you advice. I feel as though people who aren't in Greek life, who aren't in strong clubs, do not have access to these things. Obviously, if they have friends higher up, but if they have someone who is really working for them, with them, to try and better their overall academic path, I feel as though the whole student body would improve their quality of life.
Okay, thank you very much. So then the next question, and we'll be going back to the 1 minute format, is what do you feel you'll to improve on the most between now and the time you were elected GM, if you were elected GM? And we'll start with Dan.
Can you please repeat the beginning of that question?
What do you feel you'll have to improve upon most?
Is it pertaining to the student union, pertaining to student government? It's pretty broad.
Fair enough. Pertaining to the specific role of GM and its duties.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier, I want to try and be a more informed liaison between student body and the student government. And my previous position as president of the ring committee, I sent out surveys and they were actually well taken. A lot of people replied to the surveys, and that's what basically built our class ring design. I feel it instilled a sense of class spirit, and every person had a say in what their class ring was going to be, what their design was going to be. We need more student involvement in that such. And obviously the answer isn't just going to be surveys, but if we have a GM that is willing to table once a week with student senate committees just to get the word out on their projects, and if everyone gets to shake the GM's hand or meet with them and talk about the current committees that are going on in the projects, that's how we get people more involved, get committees thriving in a better position basically to complete their projects that have been passed over between year and year. Sometimes, enough is enough. You can't extend committees.
Time. Okay, Paul, your turn.
So I'd like to begin this statement by rebutting to some of the points that Dan addressed, just because one of the things that we've tried previously in the past, I believe during Kyle's term, the Senate had a heavy involvement in the spring semester that year with tabling and trying to use that as our primary form of outreach and primary function that we used to get more people involved in Senate, and it just simply did not really have that much work, since you're just another table in the long list of tables that are out every week working on something or asking you to come over for this or asking you to come over for that. So I just feel, based off of that experience, is the main reason why that's not really included as one of the main functions of my platform, because it's been tried already and it isn't the most plausible idea. Moving on from that, I feel like a lot of the things that I know personally about myself and that have been brought up over the course of my campaign through pretty much every venue people have had to ask me questions is professionalism. Specifically with me, it's not the question of whether or not I can act with the level of professionalism or maturity that's needed, but it's whether I can consistently hit that note every single week, week in and week out, because there have been times where it just didn't happen.
That's time. So thank you very much. Next question. What is your opinion on student government's handling in response to the executive director of the union job listing and recent events surrounding union autonomy, and what would you have done differently if possible? So once again, it's basically your opinion on what's been going on, as well as pretty much what would you have done. And let's see, we'll start with Paul. Thank you.
So I believe that we worked fairly well to address these questions, especially since it was brought up with a really bad timeline for us to work with addressing something where we found out about it very recently. Everybody's terms are ending at the end of this week. The new executive board will be named about 2 weeks after the new Senate's term begins, and then in early April is when the end of this job posting was supposed to happen. So working with a condensed timeline, once we were able to get a clear picture of what needed to happen or what needed to be done, I feel that student government, and especially Marcus and Nick, worked well in forming a coordinated response to try to get students, not only get students together to ask questions that needed to be asked, but when we found that there were students gathering in other locations and students generating their own ideas, we went to them to see what their concerns were and tried to hear back from them. A lot of what we did, whether it was ranging from us attending Professor Puka's class as groups, to Jeremy Feldman, Nick Thompson, and I leading the response to writing the letter that was student government's initial response to the executive director position, to us all attending the town hall and attending Dr. Ross's forum, I believe showed our dedication to not only making sure that our voices and our constituents' voices were heard, but ensuring that we wouldn't stop until we got satisfactory answers and the future of the union was ensured.
That's time. Dan?
So to start off, I believe that the student government has acted efficiently, effectively, and in the best manner that they could have at the time. Now, as more and more I talk to the GM and PU about the current issues, I realize that anything they really did that was reactive wasn't that reactive in the sense of just acting impulsively. They've got a lot of misinformation from the administration. They've had many questions answered in a vague response. And I feel as though it's not how they acted about it now, but how can we prevent this from happening in the future? This is currently an ongoing issue. It's being reviewed right now. So in my opinion, we did everything we could to the circumstances, especially with the fact that the posting was posted over spring break and during the changeover terms. I feel as though that was kind of like a foresight of the reasoning. However, I think it would be more important to ask the questions of how do we really reach the administration. I know that Nick and Marcus have tried to reach out to administration multiple times, many a month, and they have just been stonewalled basically, and they cannot get through. So this is why I want to rebuild a relationship with them, because I feel as though all we're doing is sending them complaints, arguments, and just demands, and CODIS isn't getting through to them.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question is, a lot of students would like to see more transparency in terms of the e-board and the Student Senate. Do you feel that this is necessary? And if you do, what are some specific ways you would like to achieve this? And we'll start with Dan.
I too share in that want, considering that I was impromptu kicked out, one would say, of the last Senate meeting. Not kicked out, but they called for a closed meeting where they were going to talk, and I was the only one in the room that needed to leave. So I personally felt as though I was kind of cheated. That alone just says something about the level of transparency that they're trying to reach out to right now. But basically, I want to try and increase the transparency through having a bi-monthly just open forum to students, and I want to have actually a united website. Right now you Google Student Senate RPI, and there are 4 different websites that come up, and all of them just kind of run around in circles. We need to choose one, advertise it more, and actually post minutes, post everything that's going on, because I looked on it many a times, and even the meeting dates aren't exactly updated for even if people want it to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul?
So pretty much the things that I think we should work on to improve transparency and improve communication is essentially releasing documents that we're working on and releasing pretty much all of the paperwork we have as it's ongoing. And by this I mean we should work on making sure that we start using the centralized student government website that was formed last year, and especially the Senate page of it more, to ensure that people know who their representatives are and how to contact them in the event they need to. Further, I'll work with the new Senate Secretary to ensure that our Senate agendas are posted ahead of time for meetings, as well as the minutes for those meetings being posted promptly as soon as they're ready and possible after the meeting. further in terms of the projects we're working on and our different documents, I'd start trying to enforce the model that I started using with the Rules and Elections Committee last year when we were working on our petition handbook, and which I continued this year with the Student Life Committee, where with a lot of our projects, we would release drafts of our documents on Reddit or on other forums online or on the student government website itself to ensure that people would be able to comment on and look at the Google Docs that we prepared to ask questions, suggest changes, and a lot of positive feedback that we've had in documents we were working on actually came from this. So this would pretty much be the model that I would use centered around our website to increase transparency.
Thank you. Next question will be candidate specific. First, Paul. So you talked about how you feel you need to improve your professionalism. How do you plan to do this, and how will you prevent any form of, I guess, non-professional behavior from happening during your term as GM?
So the main thing that I would work on to ensure that I maintain my actions being in a professional manner and in a manner that's appropriate for the leader of the Student Senate and the student body to think about is working on reflecting on things more and thinking more before I initially act. Because with a lot of the actions that people talk about, with me acting unprofessionally or doing something rash, are things that if I think about it for 5 minutes beforehand or 5 minutes ahead of it, it would be something that I probably would not have done because I see those errors myself. And it's just a case of I've been gradually working on and cutting those down and decreasing those outbursts. And it's been improving over time, but I understand that as Grand Marshal, it's another step forward, and when you make that step forward, it's time when you need to cut those down to zero and cut it down to a minimum. And part of this is working on making sure that I'm surrounded by a strong cabinet and a strong team who will be working to support me, as well as personally just holding myself to a higher standard in terms of knowing that I can't goof off during meetings. I can't be the person making jokes or doing whatever when it's my job to set the tone and the pace for the Senate, which is something that I've done when I've been a committee chair and a leader, so I'm certain that I will be capable and able to do this successfully as the leader of the Senate.
Thank you very much. And then moving on to Dan. So you've previously served as a class representative, I believe, but you've never previously served on the Senate itself. So how do you feel that you'll be able to sort of connect to the senators and sort of be able to work with them and manage them?
Sure, that's a really good question too, and it's obviously a concern for many. But I've had more experience in student government than just being representative. I'm class of 2017 treasurer as well as head of the Ring Committee. So I've been involved in student government, obviously not the Senate branch. I've sat in on many meetings. I was part of the budgeting task force committee my freshman year, and I wanted to join Senate last year. However, I was vice president of my fraternity, and I didn't want to split that between two positions because I wanted to give full effort. But basically, I know a lot of people on Senate right now. I've been to meetings. I know how things work, basically, and that's why I'm running. I'm running because I'm not on Senate. I'm running because I, as an outsider, can see so many things and so much potential that isn't being tapped into right now. That's why I'm running. I'm running because I'm not on Senate. Sometimes you need a different perspective, and I feel as though I would provide that different perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. So then the next question is, what would need to be accomplished for you to consider your term as Grand Marshal to be a success? And we'll start with Dan.
Okay, starting off, I want to decrease the anonymity and the vagueness of our union constitution. I want to have a solid platform to where the student union will stand in respect to the administration. That's when I know I will have been a successful GM, so I can prevent issues like this from coming in the future. Also, I will be happy, as I have served a term for GM, if we have a two-way street of communication between administration. If we can email administration and they email back within a day, little things like that. They're gonna hit the reply button much more likely if they know you face to face, if they have a relationship with you. And I wanna try and build a relationship, as well as getting the potential candidates for GM and PU next year to get involved in that same relationship so we can continue this on, because that's what we need right now.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
So there are three things which I would like to see, which are, one, ensure the future of the Rensselaer Union for the next 125 years and beyond that by working with the administration and the board of trustees to clarify the situation which came up recently and started with the executive director position being announced and the vagueness which we're still currently trying to rectify. Second, I would like to have a successful completed project by every single Senate committee, whether it's something that ends with a proposal, something that ends with a letter to the administration, or something that ends with just having something physical or tangible set up that will be able to be used by students and taken advantage of. There are a lot of different things that we can work on, but I believe the fact that the Constitution being something that we've reviewed annually for the past 3 years, with this being the first year that the current seniors have been at the school that we aren't doing a Constitution review vote, means that the Constitution isn't vague, which is the fact in the case, being somebody who sat on the Constitution Committee for the past 2 years. In terms of having a one-day response relationship with the administration, as a Senate subcommittee chair and going into my time as a Senate committee chair, I've already had relationships like that built up with different administrators. And
Best time. Okay. So, building off of the previous Grand Marshal's platform and what he's pretty much went to accomplish, what of his actions or his platform do you wish to continue? And we'll start with Paul.
So I believe the first thing that Marcus has worked on a lot that I would like to build off of is the fact that he's worked a lot with planning and timelining things out to make sure that all of the different committees stay on track with getting all of their different projects done, getting them completed on time, and just having periodic checks in with the cabinet and with and internally to make sure that they're staying on track for the timelines they need to get different works and things done. Second, one of the things that he's been using as part of this, which he's building on, is building essentially a master Senate calendar of times of the year which are important for us to make sure that we're working with the administration on certain things. So for example, we won't have an issue this year where the student life performance plan wasn't presented to the Senate this year because they didn't approach us like they normally do. So when we have the schedule built, we'll be able to go forward, and when we know it's the time of year they've completed this plan, and because they do it around the same schedule every year, we'll be able to go to them and say, hey, when will you be coming to us to present this? When do you want us to put you on the schedule for this meeting? Which will help with building the communication and the interaction between us and them working as partners rather than the current situation we have in some issues, being able to meet with them whenever we need to consistently.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Sure. So I would like to continue what Marcus has done with the Senate in continuing an active role in every committee in taking responsibility for every single action that they've done in any project, making sure that they've stayed on track. Also, I would like to try and continue some things that he hasn't really been able to improve on with the recent turmoil in the union, which would include trying to increase intercollegiate affiliation between us, Russell Sage, UAlbany. I feel as though that is a very untapped resource to get a different viewpoint and perspective on other things. I'd like to try and continue his goals as of last year to try and get involved with other colleges in the area. And that way we can breed and foster a better avenue of development. We can see what other colleges are doing, what works for them, what doesn't. Things like that, I think, are just as important. We're not in a little bubble known as RPI. We're in Capital District. And we should create these bonds with other colleges because they can help us just as much as we can help them.
Okay, thank you very much. So that will conclude the portion of the debate where I ask you guys questions, and now we'll open up the floor to the audience. So I believe there's a microphone right in front of me here, so please make a line, keep your questions civil, and ask these two gentlemen whatever you would like.
Question is for Dan. You talked a lot about being an outsider in the Senate and that giving you an advantage. Do you worry at all about coming onto the Senate as an outsider and having not any direct experience as a student senator, and then having the senators not respect you as much and having to exert your authority over them because you really haven't done their job and you really are now instructing them in a job you haven't really done yourself? That's it.
Thanks for the question. And that is one of the issues that I faced when basically wanting to run for Grand Marshal. Obviously, I know I'm not on Senate, and that was a worry of what basically is going to happen when I get on Senate as GM. However, I have relationships with a lot of people on Senate, and I feel as though they respect the decision of the student body. So in the end, if they really get to know me and I get to know them, I don't think there will be any issues as much as my goals, and we all have a unified goal. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing, basically. And that's why I want to try and instill that. If we have a very divided Senate, I want to try and fix that as much as possible. Every Senate's different, obviously, from year to year. So it'll really depend on the elections this year, because I know there are a lot more senators running for, a lot more senators that are running this year. So it's going to be a different dynamic, and I want to try and solidify a united dynamic as soon as we get in the Senate. Thanks for the question.
Any other questions?
So in an elected position such as this, one of the challenges you're going to be faced with is communicating with a wide variety of individuals constantly. So describe times when you've had to interact with multiple groups of personalities. This goes to both of you, by the way, sorry I didn't preface with that. You're going to have to deal with some strong personalities. You're going to have to deal with a lot of personalities. How do you do that? How do you communicate? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses?
Since it's for both candidates, we'll start with Paul.
So I believe that the time that I've served in student government throughout my time in high school, where I went to a diverse international school where we had students from 30-some different countries, and I served as our student body president, to my time working as a senator and a representative of my class for the past 3 years, and a committee chair for the past 2 years, will help me know how to do this. Since I've had a lot of times where last year as the Rules and Elections Committee chair, I had to run info sessions for groups of different people, answer questions for them. I've worked as Student Life Committee chair on bringing in different people and a lot of different ideas into the room and getting them to the table to help us work on forming documents and speaking to each other. And kind of the thing that I've learned, the key to working with different people and people from diverse backgrounds or diverse ideas, is kind of coming to them, finding what common ground you have to speak on and common ideas you have, and building off of there, since there tends to always be some similarities in terms of we want the best things for the school, or we want to work to make sure that we have progress and move forward. So while there will be a lot of different ideas, and you'll have to do things like changing the type of tone you use, changing the style you use, sometimes you need to be more aggressive, sometimes you need to be less forceful. It's just kind of getting the experience which you have working in these types of situations and being able to read the situation and react to kind of meet that person where they are and meet them with an appropriate style.
Thank you. Dan?
So this isn't a very easy question to answer, but basically I feel as though I am a genuine person. I'm someone I go out of my way to talk to anyone, everyone. I volunteered for IFC to ride shuttles with accepted students, and that's about as broad of a base of people that you could ever imagine. We're a very diverse school, and I've talked to almost every single person out of the 3 rounds of buses that have gone through, about 90 different prospective students, all from different walks of life, about genuine questions about RPI and just little things like that. I've had experience talking with a lot of people through my roles in my fraternity. I've tabled multiple times for philanthropy events. I've run other philanthropy events. And you get different people, different ages, extrovert, introvert. And I think the most important thing is to be genuine. Someone who's easily confrontable is obviously going to have a better time talking to different walks of life, basically. And that's what I've been trying to do for the past 3 years here at RPI, is to get to know more and more people, as I feel like that every single person has a part at this school, and I want to make sure that each one is represented.
Okay, thank you.
My question is for the both of you. What experience have you guys had with dealing with the administration, and in what context did you guys talk with them, and how'd it go?
Since it's for both questions, we'll start with Dan.
So I've been in close contact with a lot of administration in the student union as class treasurer, as we have to go through different budgeting issues, filing out forms and such. And I'm on a very, emailing face-to-face basis relationship with various student union administration. In other aspects, I've talked to our CTO of the Institute a few times. Similar to that, we've exchanged contact information. Just little things like that. And honestly, when you talk to the people, you get a better understanding of what's going on. If you read something that is fueled by anger or hatred, that's how you're going to feel. If you get an answer from the people who are trying to help us, you're going to have a better understanding of the big picture. And I don't believe that everyone out there in the administration is trying to get us, trying to throw one over. I believe that many of them are genuine, and right now they're just in a learning curve for some newer positions, and I feel as though that's what we're caught up in right now, and there's just been a huge miscommunication that we need to have fixed.
Thank you. Paul?
So I've been interacting with institute deans and institute vice presidents over the course of my time in Senate pretty much since my first year here, where I was a project lead for our residence halls project, where we worked on getting student feedback and communicating it to appropriate deans and members of the administration so they would know student concerns on infrastructure and residence halls. And over time, as my role in Senate has grown and I've moved on to further leadership roles, the amount of administrators and interactions that I've had with them have grown as well, to the point that I pretty much every semester for the past year, I've had at least one meeting with Vice President Rounds, and I've been able to successfully work with him on issues like getting the ability for the Student Senate to review the new inclement weather policy that will be instituted next year, and communicating with him for the past couple of years about reviews that changes students want with residence halls. I've worked with the Director of Auxiliary Services, Alex De Silva, on setting up things for either mall shuttles or working with the Hospitality Services Advisory Committee on things like that. Over the summer while I was here, Marcus and I met with Vice President Ross, and I've had ongoing conversations with him where sometimes it's taken a while to get in a meeting with him. Other times I've gotten an instant response from him the next day about issues like students not being able to access their classrooms due to having accessibility issues and it being in a building that isn't that set up to be comfortable for that. So I've had a lot of interaction with different administrators working on a lot of my different Senate projects, most of which have been successful and led to tangible results for the student body.
Thank you.
Hey guys, so this is a question for both of you. It's been about a month so far since the issues that we're being faced with in regards to the union came to light. Since that, I know, as you said, Paul, that Marcus and the Senate have been doing really well in regards to collecting information and planning and things like that. However, there has been what could be considered a serious case of inaction over the last two emergency Senate meetings. When the Senate was informed of the problems, it was said that there was going to be some response from student government to the administration. I know that a letter was written at some point, I believe during the first or prior to. At the second meeting recently, like a week and a half ago, that letter was tabled 17-3. And I'm wondering, as Grand Marshal, what can you, how do you feel about that inaction? And also, what would you do as Grand Marshal to make sure that things like that don't happen?
Okay, we'll start with Paul.
So first of all, just to provide some perspective about that issue, since I was one of the senators working on this, we sent a letter out to the administration, which was the letter which I had previously referenced, which had been written by members of the Senate and Executive Board. And then after we heard a petition from a student, which asked us to send a list of certain requests to the administration, we decided that to make sure that these requests would be heard and would be taken seriously by the administration, we needed more time to research and gather data to make sure that if you're going to, we'd go to them with a solid case built up with numbers, with facts, with cases from other institutions to back up the arguments we're making. Because if we just go to them with a list of requests, that will just build into the idea that we have that we're an unprofessional group, that we're a group of children who aren't ready to being able to take real leadership. And I believe in the last Senate meeting, the reason that this decision on the second letter was tabled was because the Senate felt that we still had not had enough time to gather up enough data to make an educated decision, because this is one of those things which we have one shot and one opportunity with. We don't have a chance to give them these arguments when they aren't well explained, well thought out, and backed up with evidence, and then come back to them later, a week or two later, and be like, oh yeah, here are the things that we just were able to piece together to back them up. So I feel that over the course of the next few weeks, I'll be working with Marcus and the committee that he's chairing to work on this response to make sure that this document and this research, which I've been one of the people contributing to it personally, is finished in a timely manner, and then it's addressed as soon as possible by the next Senate.
Thank you. Dan?
So the first thing following this, I believe that the actions done by the Senate were correct in the sense that they did need to gather pardon me, information that they could benchmark at least to provide a valid argument. However, I feel as though that I was in attendance on the Senate E-Board emergency meeting. It was approximately 4.5 hours of trying to figure out what they're going to do with the letter, wording, decisions, and after all this to have it tabled, I feel as though that time and that pivotal stage in this process could have been utilized for benchmarking, for trying to learn more. And I feel as though like a bureaucratic, the way they're going about things is not as efficient as it could have been. And I feel as though there are many other ways that could have streamlined this process instead of having so much internal conflict, as though that a lot of opinions weren't being pressed through, nor were benchmarking. So basically, I want to try and streamline Senate processes and try and take charge when I feel as though that if there is not a correct motion or the right actions going on right now, I want to try and turn things around and try and be more proactive about how we're going to solve this. If they decided that they needed more benchmarking before arbitration in the letter, it would have been much cleaner, it would have been more effective use of time.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, definitely.
Sure.
We did decide that we needed more time to make these decisions and more time to gather the data the previous week, which is why we had initially tabled it. The reason we came back and tabled it a second time was because we had been doing work. We had already been gathering things, but we did not have enough time over the course of 1 week to form these arguments. This is normally a document which, to be honest, would take the Senate several months or the course of most of a semester to complete, but we've been working on trying to make sure that it will be done by the second regular meeting of the next Senate. Pulling these numbers together and pulling together our benchmarking from peer institutions and our arguments and statistics for this is not a process that it's feasible to get done in 1 week. It just won't happen, and we would rather take a little bit of extra time and ensure that we do something that will be able to pass and will be able to get the results for our constituents that they'd want than push something through in a short amount of time.
Thank you. So for the sake of time, I have a question from our online audience, and then we'll have time for one more viewer question, and then we'll go to closing statements so we can get done around 8 p.m. So the question we have from our online viewership is, what is your stance on the Save the Union movement, and what have you done to support the future of the union? And we'll start with Dan.
So my stance on the State of the Union initiative is a positive one. I feel as though that it is effectively portraying the student body's views currently and is trying to continue the traditions that we have had the last 125 years. Now, I would like to further that in having more of the higher-ups basically in the movement try and be more actively involved in the student senate committees, as well as being more active in the meetings, and if I do get elected, have more say in what's going on, as well as being a more effective, they're a very effective liaison between the student body and us. I believe that it is a large enough group as though that their views can be and will be portrayed in an effective manner in the future. So I would like to continue that.
Thank you. Paul?
So my view on the Save the Union movement is that it's been a positive opportunity and the first real time that we've seen in several years that such a large number of Rensselaer students have come together to raise their voices and speak out on their concerns and the things they want out of their institute, and done it in such a large and visible way, which anytime students are expressing themselves clearly and stating what they want out of the institute, into doing it in a manner that's clear, that's civil, and that's reasonable, which this has been, which the Save the Union movement has been, is an excellent opportunity. When at Professor Puka's class, I was there, I was participating in it. I spoke to the group that was there a couple times, talking about student government's response and where we stood on it, where I stood on things. I was trying to relay information from inside the town hall discussion from senators who were there outside to a larger group of people. I know several people saw me talking to different members of the audience there or running back and forth between things. I believe these actions and the things that I've done speak enough about where I stand on the move, on saving the union and what I feel should be done about it, which is working further, which I've done with several members who are heavily involved of the union, who are heavily involved with the movement, working with them and explaining why the Senate's been doing what we're doing, how we choose to move forward, trying to get them involved in our processes and reaching out to them already as we've been preparing the documents we've been working on over the past couple weeks. And this would be something that I intend to do even more as the leader of the Senate.
Thank you. So I previously said there was one more question, but apparently there are two people standing in line. So rather than having them fight for who gets to speak, we'll let both of them speak. So I guess we'll take two more questions, then closing statements.
Hi, my question is for both candidates. How do you plan to promote a mentality within Senate of voting for what constituents want as opposed to voting what senators themselves want?
Yeah, I could do it.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
So I believe the best way to ensure that senators are communicating with their constituents and ensuring that they'll accurately be representing their views would be to work to raise the profile of the class councils and try to get more involvement in class council, since all class senators have to serve on their respective class council, and it would be one of the most effective forums since you already have a group of students there from their class year to communicate with them. And if the class presidents and class vice presidents and senators and representatives were able to move into more of a role of, rather than just planning events from their class, but being the main hub center that ideas and feedback and things move through, it would work to streamline that flow coming into the senators and help them know where to go to get a more accurate view of, hey, this is how my constituents feel about this, this is what I should do moving forwards, than having a situation where you're just trying to send them out willy-nilly to go do something like dorm storming or reaching out to different people. And I know that my class president and class vice president, Kyle and Michael, have already worked on doing something like this, where they'll send out in their regular emails ideas that they think, things that they think are important, or let members of our class know about discussions they feel they should be able to take part of if they feel appropriate. So I feel like this would probably be the best first step to take, since there's already a group that's supposed to be representing your class as a whole.
Thank you. Dan?
Can you repeat the question so I can answer it thoroughly?
I don't know the
How are you going to work to promote that senators work more for the constituents than just themselves?
Sure. Okay. So I think one good policy that we had a while ago, it was just a little event called Dinner with the Senators, where the senators would go into dining halls and just talk to the students in them, talk to the student body that they're representing. Little things like that, including red polo days where they wear their student senate polo out to classes. People recognize that. I mean, not everyone would inquire on, oh, you're wearing a student senate polo, but some do, and some talk to you about it, and that's how you spread the word. Even, I think it's great that we had so many candidates for PU, just because that's 600 signatures times 4. So they talked to 2,400 people about what's going on in the union. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap, but the fact of the matter is that it's spreading information, spreading knowledge. And back to the question, I feel as though if the student senators right now partake in these events like dinner with the senators and red polo days, it's going to be a better avenue for open communication as well as to kind of get a feel or judgment of what's going on. And with that, I think it's great that the senators have to be part of the class council because the class council orchestrates events for their class for school spirit. And with those out there, I think they should have their red polos on at the class council events. They could see that, you know, they're targeted events to the class. So we're going to have a lot of the participation. If between all 4 class councils, we can represent the whole student body and undergraduate, and that's a huge step forward. And I feel as though little things like that do make a difference. And if they try and actively communicate with as many people as they can, it's not a small task. It's a very large task. We have a huge student body, but every effort that they take will help them get a better understanding of what the student body thinks and feels.
Thank you. And then the last question before closing statements.
Hey guys, glad to see you guys up there going after the hat. Really appreciate it. I would like first to clarify to everybody, just to make sure there's no misinformation, that the Senate letter was sent out to the Board of Trustees and the President. It was referenced in the President's speech when I asked her a question. If you'd like to see the letter, you can check that out online. Now, for my question to the candidates, the Grand Marshal's role has a lot of responsibility and can be ambiguous at times. And so with that comes a lot of different expectations from different groups of people. For each of you, what area do you see in the future as an area of weakness that the students will criticize you for?
We'll start with Dan.
I'm gonna need a second for that one. That's a curveball. I gotta think about this. Going through the roles as of right now, I feel as though there's going to be potentially some criticism in having an effect on administrative procedures. I feel as though that I want to do as much as I can to create an open line of communication with the administration. However, it's only going to be as effective as they will let it. I will do everything that I possibly can to try and build as many relations as I can with administration. However, there's no guarantees on really anything. We're going to do everything that we can do to try and keep, ambiguous positions from being appointed, from trying to get positions that are fulfilled, that aren't being fulfilled right now. And I feel as though there's going to be some possible criticism on the effectiveness of my campaign because it sometimes is largely based on administrative action.
Thank you. Paul?
I believe the aspect of the role of Grand Marshal that I would probably be criticized on the most, again, deals with my demeanor and the fact that a lot of the time when I'm interacting with people or doing stuff, I tend to come across at times as being somewhat aloof or seeming like I'm not entirely paying attention to what you're saying just because I'll be typing something on my laptop or looking at my phone or just flitting around since I tend to be really busy, and even if I'm listening to you and giving you my full attention with something, I'll seem like I'm zoned out or kind of tuned out from what you're saying. So just one of the things that I would need to work on is making sure that whenever I'm meeting with people or talking to constituents, I go out of my way to make sure that I know that their voice is being heard by me and that I work on making sure I get contact info from them so I can either forward them onto the appropriate committee, give them feedback directly, tell them who they should work with, or just letting them know that I made sure that I heard the concerns and did something to try to make sure that they would be addressed so that everybody knows that I'm working on communicating with them effectively and working directly with them to make the school a better place rather than just sitting there and, well, wearing a doofy hat from the 1800s.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that being said, that'll conclude all the questions for the GM debate. So I'll let both of you have a closing statement. And we'll start with Paul, and you have 3 minutes.
I have how many minutes was that?
3.
Okay, thanks. So over the past few weeks, as a lot of people have been discussing the different changes that are potentially happening to the union, which are to a large extent changes that we don't really want to see, I've been talking with a lot of current members of student government and student government alumni who I'm still in contact with. And one of the things that came up in one of my discussions with Kyle Caraga, the previous Grand Marshal, was we're at an interesting time for the union where we've really ended up in one of those moments that we realize now will be kind of one of the stories people involved in student government will be talking about 10 or 15 years from now, about the stories of what went down when they were trying to save the union, or the protests that happened outside, or different things like that. When we're in moments like this, one of the main things that we need to work on keeping is the momentum we have moving forward already. We need to work on taking advantage of the momentum and the interest we have from members of the union to get involved in the union and work for the change they want to see, not only with this, but all the different areas of the school that they can change and they can help influence that they don't even know about. The Student Senate works on different tasks and things on campus, ranging from trying to get pharmacies on campus to getting MOs established, to even little things like getting picnic tables or water bottle refilling stations on campus. And I believe the best way to ensure that this momentum is kept and the relationships that we're building are ensured and strengthened is to have a smooth transition. And the fact is just something that was proven a few years ago with a GM transition to a Grand Marshal who was new to the role, is there will be a lag time. There will be a few months where somebody who comes in from outside the Senate just isn't sure what the different apparatus and tools that we're working with are or how to use them properly. You hear Dan mentioning things like Red Polo Days or Dinner at Commons. The reason I'm not talking about these are I've participated in these, I've seen them, and I know the effect that they have and the fact that they just simply aren't the best tools we have to get people involved and to work with members of the student body. I've served in a leadership role and have experience working with administrators and communicating in a way that they appreciate and have told me they appreciate as being frank, honest, and to the point about what students' concerns are and what they want. I've been in the room for discussions about summer art. I've been in the room with administrators early in the year all the way through meeting with them over the summer. I'll be able to take over and work on not only these issues, but make sure that I'm able to balance working on the new issues that arise while making sure the Senate doesn't drop our current obligations ongoing with projects like trying to get an on-campus pharmacy and working on establishing a green revolving fund or working on ensuring that the Institute gives students the appropriate help they need securing fellowships and funding. So this is why I believe that I would be the best choice for the new Grand Marshal. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
Okay. So basically to finalize things, I think that we need to really stress effective continuation of the current Senate committees. I believe that every single chair needs to be represented by someone who is passionate about what they're doing, passionate about the future of the plans that they have in the Senate committees. The Student Senate is nothing less than its committees. The committees are the strongest and most essential part of the Student Senate. I want to try and unite the student body right now to try and get behind some of the committees through the same passion that we have for Save the Union. Right now, it's a revolutionary time, and not in the revolt standpoint, but in the standpoint of change. There's a huge involvement in the student body, and we need to keep that continuing. I believe this is a great start, and why I want to be Grand Marshal is because I can see so much potential from the lack of apathy that the student body is showing, that how much they care. And now is the time to get information out while people are awake, while people are evident of what's going on, and that's how we get more involvement in the committees. That's how we actually make a change at RPI. I want to be Grand Marshal where my term has made a profound change in the future of the student union as a whole through its active participation. And branching off of that, I feel as though that we need to increase the academic side of the student union as much as obviously how it is run. We are one together. I feel as though that every single person would go out of their way and help someone if they asked, and I think all that is really restricting that is that people aren't asking sometimes. Sometimes people aren't comfortable. I feel as though if we try and instill more of a sense of unity as we have been before, that the possibilities are endless between just overall like boosting our GPA as a college, between having effective programs, effective committees, it all stems from the student body. They're the catalyst. And right now, I feel as though this is the most important time to have a strong leader who's ready to try new things, to try and improve old things. Just because something didn't work before doesn't mean it won't be able to work again. Sometimes you have to do things from a different approach in the sense of just trying to make people even more sociable, more open to talking to people, to communication. Little things make a big difference. So that's why I want to be GM, because I want to instill a sense of unity and pride in the student union.
Thank you very much. So with that being said, that'll conclude the Grand Marshal debates. Thank you to the audience for your time, as well as both candidates, and best of luck tomorrow. So we'll take a short pause and then begin with the President of the Unit debates. Yeah, I'm gonna go 5 down. I'd be going up right now. I have to go like 5 down or something like that because it's a minute, so like 30 seconds is tough. It's just that weird. Yeah. All right, everyone, we're gonna get started pretty much now. So if everyone can take your seats and get ready. Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to the President of the Union debate. Today we have with us 4 candidates from left to right. We have Keegan Caraway, Chip Kirshner, Shannon Gillespie McComb, and Liam McEnany. I hope I pronounced everyone's name right, but in general, we'll follow a similar format to the previous debate. One main exception is that opening and closing statements will be 2 minutes rather than 3, and so that there aren't just awkward cutoffs. I'll give you guys 5 or so second countdowns when you're running out of time. We'll have to keep a tighter schedule because obviously more candidates want to ask as many questions as possible within our time frame. You'll have a minute for responses, and once again, we'll open the floor to audience questions towards the end. So, do any candidates have any questions before we begin? So then we'll begin with opening statements. Once again, they're 2 minutes, and we'll start with Liam.
Hello, everybody. I'm Liam McEnany. So I'm just going to get right into my platform. I want obviously the administrative transparency, try to reestablish the connection between the Board of Trustees, like it was in the past. There used to be students that were on the committees in order to have like information flow from the e-board to the Board of Trustees a lot quicker. Second, I want new clubs to get money a lot faster. In the current budgeting process, it takes about a year and a half to get any like real sort of money from the e-board, and in that time, a lot of clubs, they lose interest and they kind of dissolve. And I want to expand upon developing new clubs and encouraging student initiative. And I also want to increase graduate, undergraduate interaction by having more student, graduate, undergraduate programming at the union, centered around the union, so that there can be more interaction between the graduate and undergraduate communities, so that more people can find out what's out there, you know, research-wise or opportunities, and just more networking.
Thank you very much. Shannon, your turn.
Hi, my name is Shannon Gillespie McComb. I'm running for president of the union. The reasons why I'm running and believe that I'm qualified is because I have been working on an executive board since the age of 13 for the largest and oldest environmental group in the country, the Sierra Club. I was working with administrators at community, state, and countrywide levels at 8, and I have been doing so ever since. Furthermore, I studied abroad in England at the University of Leeds, where the student unions there have complete autonomy under their government. I got involved in their union first, and that sparked a love for unions in general, of really getting an idea of what a student-run union was to its purest form. Furthermore, when I came back, I had already had the position because I interviewed with Nick Dvorak to be on the executive board, and I've been serving on your executive board for the last year. I've loved serving. I think my talents of getting to the point and trying to move along meetings, speaking up when I felt that something was wrong, coupled with my passion is really why I want the position. A few main goals. In the past year, we've really been blindsided with athletics and the executive director of student activities position. I want to spearhead Summer Arch. I want students to have the first say because we know that's coming and we can be there for the whole process. I want to make sure that we can maximize student participation in administration activities and hiring. And lastly, I want to make sure under Nick's platform and his term, He made sure that we understood where money was coming from and going to, and I think as the chief financial officer of the union, that really is what you're charged to do, is make sure that our activity fee money is all being spent in the correct manner and for the right purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chip?
Hi. So I'm Chip Kirchner, running for president of the union. Just before I start, I want to thank everybody that's made this possible. R&E for bringing everybody together. Sound and lights in the back, RPI TV, everybody helping out. Thanks for that. Debate team for coming out. And really just the audience members for coming out to hear everybody speak. I think it's really important that we get out. We understand what everybody has to say. So I've been a club officer in the union for over 2 years, and this past year I've served on the executive board. I have the experience from both sides of the table. I know what club officers struggle with. I know what executive board reps and the executive board struggles with. I'll start off right off the bat with my platform. I think we all know there's a serious communication breakdown between the student body and the administration, and that's an issue that we have to deal with immediately. It needs to be dealt with this semester, early on in the summer. If we don't deal with it now, it's going to continue to be an issue in the future. And I really want to focus on this as soon as I get into office. But at the same time, the role of president of the union is much larger than just dealing with the communication issues between the student body and the administration. For instance, summer arch is a big problem coming up. It's something the union hasn't done before. We haven't had drastic increases in summer programming ever. And we sort of have these two summers to prep and get ready and try out new things. But we have to have a solid plan, we have to get it done, and we have to work through it. And one of the ways I want to do this is sort of restructuring the way we budget right now. Right now we focus a lot on clubs and using the club system to sort of make sure all the students are getting a benefit from the activity fee. I want to make sure that it's balanced with a club-centric approach and a student-centric approach, so that when you're looking at the programs that the union hosts, there's a good balance of this club is great, it provides a good service to students, and what can we do to increase student experience here on campus, and make sure that students are getting the most bang for their buck. Just to sum up, I got to deal with communication issues, summer arch, and changing the way we budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Keegan?
Hello, I'm Keegan Caraway, and I'm running for president of the union. And I'd also like to thank everybody who took time out of their day to set this up. I know it takes a lot of time. I know you guys got here at noon, and you've been setting up since noon, and you put a lot of time and effort into this, and I thank you for that. I'll jump right into my platform. The big thing I want to first work on is obviously making sure that the union maintains its autonomy. I want to work on that through working with our communication with the administration. In the past year, that's broken down quite a bit. I know that we've had the athletics dropped on us, and then we had this executive director of student activities dropped on us, and I think that we shouldn't have that feeling of things being instantaneously told to us and had to release them publicly. I wish we had more time ahead of time, and I'd like to see if we can rebuild that trust with them where they will tell us things ahead of time so we can figure out how to address them publicly. I also want to try and grow the size of the committees of the e-board. I know that on my time on Senate, I witnessed a lot of committees get larger, and through their size growing, they could do a lot more. And I know that I was served on a couple e-board committees this semester. They were rather small, and I would love to see them grow in size. The third thing I really want to do is I helped form a club in my time here, and I helped get it union funded, and I know the process was very confusing and the steps we had to follow. I want to make sure that that's a clear process, how you make a club that's union recognized, and then how you get it union funding, because I recognize that a lot of students don't understand how that works. The last thing I really want to make sure I do is I want to work on the publicity like Nick Dvorak did. I think he did a great job of reaching out to the students, and I want to continue to do that. And the reasons I think I can do these things is I served on Senate for 2 years. I've served on many committees, both on the e-board and Senate, and I think that my experience in both can help me bridge the gap and make sure that we reach out to students, administration alike, as we move forward during these trying times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now that opening statements have been included, we'll move right into the question and answer period. First question is, in your own words, what is the Rensselaer Union? And we'll start with Keegan.
To me, the Rensselaer Union is not only just the building, but it's the students within it. A lot of what it is it's the clubs and the services that it offers, and it stands for everything that we as students appreciate. It stands for the clubs, it stands for the services that are offered, and I think a lot of students don't know about the services that exist here, and I would love to make sure that we're informed about them.
Thank you. Chip?
So I think the Rensselaer Union is really about the bringing students together on campus and creating an awesome campus experience for everyone here. Right, we're all here for 4 years, sometimes more for graduate students. But really, we want to make it count. Right, it's not just about academics. It's not just about getting good grades. It's about having an experience and learning outside the classroom, being a club officer, getting leadership experience. These are all opportunities that are offered to students through the Rensselaer Union, and it's really a vehicle for supporting students in this way, and also a voice for the student body.
Thank you. Shannon?
I know that on paper we're an auxiliary service to the Institute, but I believe that we're the heart of the Institute because we're the students, and we make up the entire student union. And I think it's an amazing opportunity that we can come together with common ideas and form clubs or groups, participate in intramurals, and really bond as an institute, as a student body. Furthermore, I think that the union is, coming from England, the union is a representation of all of our beliefs and who we want to be and how we want to form. Because these are formative years in our lives, and we don't just want the textbook education, we want the world education.
Thank you very much. Liam?
So I believe that the union basically represents the second half of college, the non-academic half of college. It's all just student interest, student initiative, just an avenue for people to get involved and show what they love and what activities, what they want to do. And just it's a great avenue for students to develop themselves with leadership or managing funds, managing a club, and getting a group of people together to do what they want. So,
Thank you very much. So then we'll move on to the next question, and it is, what will you look for in executive board members? And we'll start with Liam.
What I specifically would like to look for in executive board members is I would want them to be personable. Even though we're managing a lot of funds, these funds go directly to people and students need to be able to connect to these board members so that they can properly communicate what they want and everything like that. I want them to be able to be accountable for the tasks that they are presented with. I don't want people who are just there just for the position. I want people that actually care about the students, about how we administrate things, and giving the best union that we can give to the students.
Thank you very much. Shannon?
So serving on the executive board this last year, I've appreciated Nick Dvorak's leadership, but I have to say that the team he formed was outstanding, and I don't even know how it was possible that we got such an amazing team. And the reason I think the team was so amazing was because we were diverse, respectful, and passionate. And by those I mean we come from all different walks of life and different backgrounds and different points of view. Furthermore, passionate. On the first day, Nick said, if you're not dedicated to this role, you can leave. I can find another person to fill your spot, which is true. Every position we do is not, you don't have to do it. We do it because we want to, and it's not for a title, it's for the actual outcomes that we can produce. And that goes along with dedication, and it's because you're invested in what you do. So I would look for candidates who are dedicated, invested, passionate, and from very different backgrounds.
Thank you very much. Chip?
Yeah, I think Shannon hit the nail on the head. The reason that the E-Board this year was so effective was just because we worked so well together, and we were passionate and motivated. And those are qualities that I'll absolutely look for in a board that I would choose. I also want to make sure that they're a diverse cross-section of the student body. They're great with teamwork and project work. Some of my plans involve using the members at large that the PU can appoint for project work that the E-Board needs to complete. So more so than just being able to represent clubs well and advocate for them in a good way, I would be looking for people that have had previous experience working with large projects and leading teams to get their projects done. But yeah, definitely passionate, motivated individuals who care a lot about the union and care a lot about the success of clubs and students in the union.
Thank you. Keegan?
When I think about this, I think about a few key words that really stick out to me. I'm probably looking for people that are very driven to do this and are accountable. I'd like to make sure that the people who are reps are making sure that they reach out to their clubs and are doing their jobs. I know that in the past there's been some issues with that. Not specifically this year. I don't know of any examples, but in the past I know that happens a lot. I know that clubs get forgotten. I know clubs don't have the communication they need, or they have issues with their reps. So I'm going to look for people that have a lot of experience in dealing with interpersonal reactions and know how to talk to people in a positive way. And I want to make sure that I talk to people that know how finances work, that will need some education on how the e-board operates, but won't be too confused when we go through the training processes of understanding how the union operates.
All right, thank you very much. So the next set of questions will be for each individual candidate, and we'll start with Keegan. So one of the points that you mentioned in your opening speech is that you're looking for specific ways to help make clubs union funded. Could you give me some specific details on how you plan to help get new clubs started and union funded?
So the way that I really want to help new clubs is I want to make it clear to them how they can form, the process that they need to go through, and talking with the policies committee, and I want to make it clear to them, if it is a club that exists, how it can become union funded. The e-board just passed some new policies recently on how a club can become union funded, and I want to make that clear to clubs that are not union funded but may seek to be union funded. I want to make that clear to them how they can go through that process and the avenues that they have available to them.
Thank you very much. A question for Chip. So you mentioned communication in your opening statement. However, this is a statement that a wide variety of President of the Union candidates have brought up. What are you going to do differently from other candidates to make sure that this is really emphasized?
Yeah, I think, every year you hear President of the Union candidates get up here and say they're going to push for regular meetings with the Board of Trustees and the administration. I think really the issue is that we can try and reach out and communicate more with the administration, but their attitude towards us also has to change in that process. If we're already pushing for these meetings and they're not having them with us, then obviously there's a different way to communicate that would be more effective. I've talked about in the past forming a leadership team on the executive board with the most senior members, and I think reaching out to all levels of the administration is a good way to communicate more with them. But I also think getting some clear, concrete language from the Board of Trustees about the role of student government and the role of the union in the Institute would be a great way for us to have more definite, defined lines of communication with the administration.
Thank you very much. Shannon, so you've stated that you've worked as part of a very efficient and very effective executive board. What will you do if you find that your personal executive board is underperforming?
We don't have time. It's not in our favor. We graduate in 4 years unless we're graduate students, and time is always of the essence, and I very much know that. I think there's a balance. We talked about earlier with professionalism. It's okay to have some lighthearted talk after the meeting, but it's not okay when we're in the meeting, we have clubs waiting for us outside to stall and be disrespectful. And I think any e-board or rep will know that there's a respect issue. If my e-board was not being effective, I would call an extra meeting, and that would be an emergency meeting, because the whole point is to get things done. Otherwise, why get elected or appointed?
Thank you very much. Liam, one part of your platform is you stated you wanted increased graduate and undergraduate communication and interaction. How specifically do you plan to do this?
So I haven't really thought of any specific event yet, but I would definitely want to get more maybe just casual, fun events or something where we come to the union, get graduates down with free food or something like that, and just set up little areas of like expertise or which like they study, what research they do. People can seek out exactly what they want, what they're interested in, go talk to those people specifically, become friends with them, just set up little areas that everyone can specifically see within the union that they study so they can figure out what they want to do.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question is, explain the type of relationship you'd like to have with members of the school's administration, including Dr. Jackson. And we'll start with Liam.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Explain the type of relationship you would like to have with the members of the school's administration.
So I would want to have a professional relationship between the administration and Dr. Jackson. I'd want to maintain just like an easy, clear-cut way to contact them, and have like a timeline of when they'll be able to respond to me. I don't expect like an instant reply every time, that sort of thing. Basically, I just want to talk to the right people at the right times to get the right things done. And as far as Dr. Jackson, I'm not exactly positive the relationship that I would have specifically with her, but just having a line of contact at least, or just to get the voice out, is what I would want.
Okay, thank you. Shannon?
So I think all the candidates and students would probably agree that we want a working relationship with Dr. Jackson and the administration. So I won't dwindle on that point, but I do think that we need to have an open relationship so that we can speak what the concerns are as representatives, to speak freely of what the concerns are in a professional manner, and at the same time have the Institute speak freely to us of what their concerns are. Furthermore, when I was on the board, I tried to reach out to some of the administration and was told to go through the president of the union. And as an executive board member, that was very disheartening because I was trying to go about it the right way. So I think trying to also put power into the executive board members as representatives, as the president of the union can't do everything, can't be everywhere. So I would hope that Dr. Jackson and the administration would work with the entire executive board, PU, GM, and the Senate.
Thank you very much. Chip?
Yeah, I think the having a working relationship with the administration is sort of a good goal to have, and especially with Dr. Jackson. My hope would be, again, I mentioned that some of the structure of the leadership on the board, having more senior members have friendly relationships with other members of our cabinet, other members of the administration, to really be there and advocate for the executive board in cases where we can't meet with Dr. Jackson or other members that we need to meet with regularly. It's really important that we develop relationships with not just the most senior members of the administration, because in the end, it's going to be difficult for us to have regular meetings with them. It's going to be difficult for us to get in contact with them in a time of emergency. So it's important to have other people that we can talk to. But yeah, definitely a working relationship, definitely friendly with more than just the most senior people in the administration.
Thank you. Keegan?
I know in the past few months I've had a lot more interactions with the administration than I've ever had before, and it seems as though they want a few big things from us as students. The two big things I hear them talk a lot about are the respect that they have from students, and I hear them talk about a rules of engagement they'd like to develop with us. And with that, I talked to Dr. Ross about more what that meant to him, and he said he'd like to develop a way that students can openly contact the administration that is both productive for them and for us. And I'd love to work on that rules of engagement with him. I'd love to figure out, do we email him? Do we talk to his secretary? What is the best way to meet with the VP and the president of the school? How do they want us to reach out to them so that we can have a productive working relationship with them? And I think that that is the way that we get to develop a relationship with them.
Okay, thank you very much. Now moving on to the next question. What is your opinion on the executive board's handling of the administration's creation of the executive director of student activities position rather than hiring a new director of the union? And then what would you do differently? So what is your opinion, and then what would you do differently? Keegan, starting with you.
So I think that my opinion of the executive director of student activities position is that I wish they had come to us and talked about it a little more. It's started to become clear what the position is in the reorganization of the student life portfolio here at RPI. However, there still is some mystery about what the position actually will do. And I would love for them to continue to talk with us more and to really figure out what that position's duties will entail and how it will affect the autonomy of the student union. I think ultimately I don't know if the position is necessary. I personally, as a student, don't see quite why we need it, but I would love for them to have the conversation with us of why we do. I think that we should rather seek to fulfill the position of the director of the union, and I think that that job, since it covers most of the duties of this new position, should be plenty for administrative positions.
Thank you. Chip?
Yeah, so just before I answer this question, you said the hiring of the executive director of student activities rather than the director of the union, which I don't think has ever been stated by either the administration or anyone in student government about it. But in terms of the executive director position, I think that the e-board did a great job of looking into the issue, trying to contact Dr. Ross and the administration, and having a professional relationship and professional communication between the two. It took a little while, as these things do, to come out and give a stance on the issue and to find out actually what was the position. There's still, as Keegan said, there are still not clear details about what it is, but obviously if it's an overreach of the administration into the duties of the director of the union, I think that the executive board should take a harder stance against the hiring of the position, as we want to maintain a student-run union, and not an administrative-run union.
Thank you. So my apologies about the confusion about that question. Just for the further sake, and in the vein that the question has been answered, we'll just talk about the creation of the new position. So Shannon?
Wait, I'm sorry. Are you saying just keep answering the same question?
Yeah, the vein that the question was taken was pretty much talking about the new position that was created. So we'll ask a little bit about, rather than just having a director of the union position. So pretty much, what's your thoughts on the new position? How do you feel the e-board handled it,
Okay.
and what would you do differently?
All right, thank you. I think the e-board handled it as swiftly as possible. The reason the posting was mid-spring break. We found out about it when we got back, obviously, and then we tried to get in contact with administration, collect information, and then distribute that, which I think is the exact way we should conduct ourselves when blindsided, because we don't want to start saying things to the students until we know the facts, and we tried to collect them as fast as possible. The executive director position I don't think is necessary. I think adding layers of bureaucracy is not going to help the two-way communication, and the description wasn't very clear, but it does seem to step on the toes of the director of the union position. I'd really like to see the director of the union position hired as soon as possible. I also think the administration was reaching, because there is a gap of communication. Maybe that was their way of trying to bridge that gap.
Thank you. Liam?
So I honestly thought the e-board probably did the best with what they could have at the time. Nobody exactly knew the extent to which the executive director would affect student activities, and we still are not clear exactly on how that position will affect really anything or how anything will operate. I think it was really wrong for the administration to attempt to make this position without giving us a clear indication of what it will do to the union itself before we could actually, think about it and see what we thought about it. So in order to do anything different, I think it would have been better there were periods of time where I don't think the e-board really said anything about the subject, so people were thinking, well, what should we think about it? What do we need to know? How's it going to affect us? Like, if they at least said something like, we don't even really know the scope of which that it'll affect, so we can't exactly tell you yet until we get all the information. So that sort of thing.
Thank you. So moving on to the next question. What do you feel you'll have to improve on the most to best fulfill the role of president of the union? We'll start with Liam.
Repeat the question, please.
What will you have to improve upon the most to best fulfill the role of president of the union?
To improve upon what Dvorak's already done?
No, just in general, like what do you need to improve upon for you to personally fulfill the role to the best of your abilities?
Oh, for me to improve upon?
Yes, sorry.
I definitely would have to do more research onto the specifics of e-board. I haven't exactly been involved specifically with e-board duties besides starting my own club, boxing club, which meets at Thursdays at 4, by the way. So I would have to get more extensive knowledge onto the ins and outs of what the e-board specifically does.
Okay, thank you. Shannon?
I'm sorry, can you clarify, do you mean this as me specifically?
Yes,
Or,
yes.
Oh, okay. What I think I need to improve upon is perhaps knowing that when we're communicating and talking, that a professional side is great and wonderful, but developing those wonderful, deeper connections and being very personable is also very important. And I think finding that balance is my key, and what I would like to focus on most if I was president of the union is finding the balance between professionalism and personabilism, which isn't a word.
Thank you. Chip?
Yeah, so I think that for me personally, I don't have very many working relationships with other students in schools with similar unions or the peer institutions that RPI has. I would really like to develop better working relationships with students and student government and other institutions so that we can have an advocate here at school, and I can be able to communicate and find information more easily about how other institutions operate, how with respect to RPI, how the union here is unique, and what we can better improve in these ways. I think my knowledge of the union is limited to our union, right? I have never interacted with people in other institutions with similar unions, so I'd really like to communicate with them more and have a better working relationship with them.
Thank you. Keegan?
I apologize. Could you read the question one more time? I'm there's been three very different answers given. I'm not sure what the question actually is anymore.
So, in essence, the question is, what do you need to do to be the best president of the union they can be? Like, what are your weaknesses, basically?
I think to be the best president of the union, you need to make sure that your e-boarders stay active and stay involved. I think you need to make sure that you make sure that everyone stays collaborative and everyone stays communicating. I think that the PU does a lot with making sure that people just are staying organized, and I think that that is the greatest thing they can do, is making sure everything stays moving.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question is, what is your opinion of the executive board's handling of the athletics budgeting change, and how would you have handled the situation differently? And I'll start with Keegan.
So the handling of the athletics was kind of dropped on us. We weren't really told ahead of time that it was going to happen. I would love to have done a little bit more research into what actually was occurring. From what I understand, it is being changed so that we can keep our accreditation for athletics, and I think that if that is the case, I think that what happened had to happen. If it was the case, however, I do understand that we've been doing it this way for as long as it's existed, and so I'd be curious why it had to change this year and not in the past. And I think the handling of it was adequate, but I would have loved to have seen a little more research done to see if this was a necessary change or not.
Thank you. Chip?
I think the executive board did an awesome job in responding to questions and concerns about this issue. If you can remember, it was almost immediate announcing that these were changing and then giving some information about what was happening. Obviously, it wasn't great for it to be dropped on us. There was no communication at all with regard to the issue. But the executive board is still currently investigating this issue. I think there are other schools that skirt around these rules for the NCAA and sort of the rules that are mentioned in the Middle States rules, which are both governing bodies of the institution and their operations. I think that this is something that can be worked on in the future if we find an ability to regain control of the athletics operating budget. Then we'll be able to present these ideas to the administration and sort of work with them to come up with a long-term solution. But as it stands now, there was definitely some lapse in communication with the administration, and we're currently looking for solutions right now on the executive board.
Thank you. Shannon?
There wasn't much handling that we did. We found out about athletics, and we tried to distribute the information as best as possible, as clearly as possible, and to the best of our knowledge. Furthermore, we maybe should have talked to the administration more about how this was done, and I don't know if we came out the right way on how athletics was taken. I know they came in and they spoke to us and tried to give us all the information why they took it, but it was done, I felt, very strongly and quickly, and I don't know what we could have done better at the time, and I think we did the best we could with the knowledge we had at the time, but hindsight is always 20/20, and I would have maybe liked to come out and just said, we find this disrespectful because we've had athletics under us for 125 years.
Thank you. Liam?
To be honest, I'm not too versed on the athletics budget e-board stuff because I'm more or less an outsider right now. But from what I know, they seem to handle it pretty well. Didn't seem to have too much outrage or anything about it. It was kind of wrong for the administration kind of just to drop it on it with no warning or whatsoever how they're going to implement it. But I can't really speak to say on how they could have improved, but it seemed to be a pretty contained issue.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question. Transparency is important to students. Should votes of the executive board be made public? And should the executive board increase vote? Wait, hold on. That's not really a question. But should the votes of the executive board be made public? And we'll start with Liam.
I think so, yes.
Okay, Shannon?
Yes, I think a lot of the votes, the only votes that we don't make public are closed meeting votes.
Do you feel that those, like all votes, should be made public?
I do not, and the only reason is because in other positions that I've held, when you're electing someone in a high position and electing them, there is sometimes information, like UPAC concerts, there was a vote that had to be done that we couldn't talk about for a while, but you have to trust your elected officials. So when you're voting, make sure you trust the people you're voting for. The closed votes, some closed votes are necessary. It's just the matter of any position. But as many votes as possible should be transparent and open. And I fully agree that we've tried to do that as much as possible.
Thank you. Chip?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure I understand the question because all votes of the executive board are already public, whether or not they're made in a closed meeting. I guess, should I want to continue that? Absolutely. I think any student should be able to go and see what the executive board has voted on, and see, what, the accompanying motion with that. And the minutes should be released on these votes, except for where there's confidential information. But yeah, votes are already public, and no matter what kind of meeting the executive board's holding, if they vote on an issue, you can go and look it up and find out what the vote was.
Thank you. Keegan?
I'm pretty sure this question pertains to the bookstore issue, and I do understand that in that sense that sometimes, yes, the votes cannot be released, and I know it's tough for the students to handle. I believe that whenever we can release them, we should, and I think that whatever the votes that they're talking about, if not the bookstore, I would love for this question to be clarified some more in what votes that were not public that they would want.
In terms of the question phrasing, it was a question that was drawn from like another source. So I was just presenting it to you in the way that I saw it. So with that being said, I have a set of questions here from the online audience. The first question is, this GM week, there's been a lot of violations and overturning of those violations, especially relating to deadlines. How do you feel these violations reflect on a candidate's ability to serve in their position, especially in the case of missed deadlines? I can restate that if you want, because that's a little bit of a lengthy question, but Keegan, we'll start with you.
All right. I think that a violation of a deadline is a little bit disappointing to see from somebody running for an office like this. I believe that deadlines are rather important, especially when interacting with someone like the administration. If you were to miss a deadline with the administration, you've missed it. You've lost the chance to communicate with them. And I think that's a close way to look at this application is if a person running missed a deadline in this case, I could see that applying to maybe the missing a deadline with the administration. So I think that's pretty disappointing to witness.
Thank you. Chip?
Yeah, I think that obviously, there's some issues with the GM week this year and some of the miscommunications and confusion surrounding deadlines. It's pretty important to meet these deadlines, but I'm not going to comment on whether this makes a candidate bad at running for office. I think handing in a form is something completely different than missing a meeting with the administration. But I'm not going to sit here and say that candidates are going to be ineffective at their job just because they handed in a form 20 minutes late or were confused about the process if the process is already confusing. So,
thank you. Shannon?
Yeah, I think that this is there's more of a complicated issue here. This GM week has been crazy with just miscommunication and a general cloud of misunderstanding between candidates and rules and elections. So I think missing a deadline in general is horrible, and I think most people know that. Everyone should know that. I grew up and I know that. But when you don't think that the deadline was that date, and other dates in the GM handbook, unfortunately, were incorrect. And I personally reached out for information in my information session. I was told it was after campaigning. So I'm one of the candidates that did not turn in my preliminary expense form on time. And the J Board ruled that it was in violation of the handbook, but that there was clearly a miscommunication, and it led to 11 candidates being miscommunicated to, which is a quarter of the candidates.
Thank you. Liam?
So I think deadlines are very important to have that goal to work towards or something to, put it in or whatever. But there needs to be, when deadlines are not met, I think there needs to be a clear repercussion, but also proportional to the offense. For example, with Shannon's expense form, she handed it in late, but it's a preliminary expense form. There's not really much to say about it. You hand it in and it says like $20 or whatever, and it's done with. The initial way that they handled it was taking candidates off the ballot. It took 11 candidates off the ballot. That was absolutely wrong to do for something as simple as a preliminary expense form, because that's the second most worst thing they could, do to a candidate, so, yeah.
Sure.
Oh, well, yeah, but in terms of candidates, character based on whether or not they make the deadlines, honestly, I don't think it means too much, because people are flexible and, things need to be, reasonable. So as long as it's in a reasonable amount of time over the deadline, I think it's okay to do.
Okay, thank you. So, for the sake of time, that will include the moderated question and answer period, and next we'll open up the floor to the audience. So, like previously in the GM debate, if you have a question, just step to the microphone.
My name is Victoria Butler. I'm a senior here at RPI, and one of the biggest parts of my experience here has been clubs, which I'm sure you guys can relate to. I was also had the good fortune to be part of a newly formed club on my sophomore year, and I know some of you guys have answered this question, particularly you, Keegan. But one of the most difficult things was trying to get that club started and trying to get it funded and learning the ins and outs of what we were and weren't allowed to do. So do you guys have any particular problems you've identified with the processes of starting clubs and how you might be able to fix those problems in the future between communication between us and our representatives and just trying to get the club working as a whole?
Sure, Liam?
Okay, yeah. So that's a main issue that I want to tackle as a person who's also started a new club, boxing club, Thursdays at 4. Basically, I think the budgeting process specifically for new clubs needs to be expedited. It takes about a year to get like $100 as a starter budget, and I know a lot of clubs, they want to go to competitions and whatever tournaments, and it costs money to enter those sorts of things. So I think for certain clubs that have a clear-cut goal to work towards, and they have teams and they have a clear organization, I think it's worth taking a risk to give them funds to go to those things so that they can focus on competing and representing RPI rather than raising funds.
Thank you. Shannon?
I really appreciate the question. Thank you. The whole point of the executive board is for clubs. And I think going into that with the mindset is we're here for clubs. We're not here to punish. We're not here to overregulate. It's just here to facilitate and make clubs the best that they can be. So I think the biggest issue would be to streamline the process and make it an easy, accessible online process of like a 5-10 step program. And then try to have like an advisor or an e-board rep that can help facilitate that process. We try now as best as we can, and policies has been trying to clarify how to make clubs, but there's still a lot of work that needs to happen.
Thank you. Chip?
Yeah, I think a lot of the changes that Shannon just mentioned are really important. The Policies Committee actually just a few weeks ago implemented these changes and recommended to the executive board that they have a position that is monitoring new clubs and assisting them in formation. Really, next year is going to be the test and the challenge to seeing whether this is an effective way to do it. I think it is. I think they did a great job with the program. But in the past, I know that it's been everybody's job to sort of monitor new clubs, so no one did it. But now, next year, hopefully, we'll be able to appoint a member whose sole purpose is to assist new clubs in forming, getting them funds, and making sure they work through the process and they have what they need for the few years that they might be not unfunded. And I think it's really important that we do this. It's really important that we get through it, and really important that I have people like Keegan and Liam on the executive board who have experience forming new clubs and can give that perspective to the rest of the members.
Thank you. Keegan?
I'll mention the same policy as Chip. I know Policy's worked quite hard on making this new policy for clubs going from union recognized to union funded, and I think that we need to do a great job of publicizing that in the next year now that it exists. I think a lot of students don't know that change occurred. I think mostly it's limited to people on eBoard and those closely involved that know it happened. I think that we should do a huge job of going out and reaching out to all the clubs that are just union recognized and telling them this exists. Let us explain it to you how it works and how you can become union funded in the near future.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor?
How's it going, guys? I will say I'm really excited to have this many people running for PU. That means I either did an all right job or I did a really bad job. So I just hope it's the former. My question is, as PU, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. You're going to have to command a team. You're going to have to make sure that you do the best job possible. So my question to all of you is two-pronged. Number one, how do you take criticism? How do you deal with what people are going to come back with? Because I promise there's people out there that don't pull a single punch. You got to have thick skin. And the second, how are you going to earn respect? Because respect isn't something that you should expect. It's something that you need to work for. How do you do it? Thanks.
We'll start with Keegan.
To answer the first prong of that, with the criticism, I've served for Senate on 2 years. We on the Senate receive a lot of criticism, and I haven't let it deter me in my drive to do student government, and so I would say that is how I've developed quite thick skin to be able to do the job of President of the Union. As far as the second prong of that, of the communication and dealing with strong-willed people, once again, I'll cite Senate as my reason for being able to handle both those pretty well, considering a lot of those issues exist on Senate and exist quite more drastically than on e-board.
Thank you. Chip?
In terms of how I take criticism, I mentioned I was a chair in UPAC Sound. I think any one of those members could tell you that I love the feedback. I love hearing about things that I'm doing wrong, or ways that I can improve myself and the way that I operate. I also, am able to filter out that criticism as into, is this helpful for me? Is this not helpful? In terms of how I'm planning on having the respect of my board and members of the RPI community, I think that the best way you can do this is to be knowledgeable and understanding in the area that you're operating in, and to have experience and background in the things that you're doing. I have that experience. 2 years as a club officer, I said, another year on the executive board. I've been heavily involved in union operations the entire time I've been at RPI, and I think that's one way to do it, and the other way is just to put in as much time and effort as you expect your board to put in. I think, somebody who's dedicated and committed will earn the respect of, other dedicated individuals that you're working with.
Thank you. Shannon?
So I mentioned in my intro that I do work on a very large national organization, so criticism is very rampant. I've heard it a lot from a very young age, and I've learned early on how to handle it and just filter, like Chip said, the good from the bad. Constructive criticism is amazing. I love when people feel open enough with me that they can express that constructive criticism, because that's the point of life, is to grow. For the second point, how you earn respect, getting down in the trenches, doing what the e-boarders are doing, trying to make sure that you're coming through on everything that you say and you get done as an obligation, because it's just how you stack up, and you need to be the best, lead by example. And in order to gain respect, you have to give respect as well.
Thank you. Liam?
So being in NROTC, we're constantly being evaluated. I'm very used to getting a lot of criticism for what I do well, what I do wrong, and I'm able to take that, without taking it personally. And as for how to demand respect out of my e-board or whatever, it's basically just knowing, having that professional expertise and being able to know what they do, so that they can understand that I know what they're doing, and talking to them, keeping a professional relationship where you can be friendly with them but not overstepping your personal boundaries, just understanding your people, and that's how you get respect.
Thank you very much. Next question.
So President of the Union, it's obviously a really important job, and as we all know, it's very time-consuming, and it involves a lot of dedication, but beyond that, if you don't have the time for it, no matter how dedicated you are, you may not be able to do as good of a job as possible. So my question is, in terms of activities, clubs, Greek life, sports, what other things besides just school and potentially President of the Union do you all do, and how do you plan to fit the potential of being in this position into all of that?
We'll start with Liam.
So on campus, I do NROTC. That mostly takes place in the morning and on select weekends. I came in with a bunch of AP credits, so next year I basically cleared out my schedule. I'm taking about 12 credits on only two, one of those classes is an actual class, the rest are Haas or electives. I started the boxing club. I plan on handing that off to an underclassman so that they can have that leadership experience. I don't have to worry about it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I should have a lot of free time next semester.
Thank you. Shannon?
I am in a sorority. I do not hold a position at this time, and I will not be holding a position next year. I am only taking 14 credits as I'm a senior, and well, I will be a senior, and I planned my senior year out so that I don't have to take that many credits just because I didn't want it that way. I am on the Sierra Club, the environmental organization I referred to, but that is once a month, sometimes emergency meetings. But for any position, if you're passionate and dedicated, just like we've done, you make time. I will have a lot of free time, but even if I didn't, I would make time because this is something I care about and love, and we've all done that in the past week or so, almost month. But yeah.
Thank you. Chip?
Yeah, I think in the past, my experience as a club officer, I was a club officer at the same time I was on the executive board, and I sat on 3 committees at the time, and also I'm chairing my own committee right now. I've shown that I have the ability to take on multiple tasks at once and to work on multiple projects. I don't see myself having any problems with time management next year. I've already been really heavily involved in union clubs and on the executive board, and the president of the union role is obviously time consuming, but I think I'm transitioning well in my club, and I think that I've worked in the past well to manage time correctly and prove that I can complete what I need to work on it. So I don't see time being an issue next year. It won't be any different from what I've had in the past, other than I'll only be focusing on president of the union at that point.
Thank you. Keegan?
As far as time involvements, I'm involved in a fraternity, and I'm involved in my IEEE, which is for electrical engineers. I'm only taking 13 credits next year due to being ahead of my program. On top of that, this semester I attended both e-board and Senate GBMs and committees. So I foresee myself having no issues having the free time to be the PU.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Hello. This is kind of aimed towards the 2 candidates with less e-board experience. I know both of you are on e-board, and you said you have some experience with it. Just out of pure curiosity, in your case, why did you decide to take the PU route instead of like the GM route? And for Liam, why did you decide to jump straight to PU versus serving on e-board or maybe getting involved in Senate?
Would any particular candidate like to start with that one?
Okay, I'll start. So the reason I wanted to be more involved with the PU executive board business is because I started my own club, so that really got me started on the whole process, seeing the inner workings. That was my main experience with it. I was a class rep, but there's really not much to do as a class rep until senior week, because we've been saving all our money for that. So basically, it's just an interesting experience to be able to go through this process and learn everything, be forced to learn, and talk to people, and it's fun.
Okay, thank you.
The reason I'm switching over to running for PU rather than running for GM is I think that my experience on Senate and sitting on the e-board and watching what occurs has given me a lot of insight into the things that I could change and I could help bring to the e-board that could help further it rather than being someone who's coming from the e-board becoming the PU.
Okay, thank you. So for the sake of time, we are going to stop the question and answer period from the floor, and we'll move on to closing statements. These will be 2 minutes apiece, and pretty much you can summarize, do what you will with the time. And we'll start with Keegan.
All right, thanks. So in summary, I'd like to point out that I helped form a club. I'd like to work a lot on making sure to reform the club process and make it a lot clearer now that we have these new policies, what they are and how clubs can become union funded now that this policy exists and was built this year by the Policies Committee. I would love to work with our communication with administration. I want to make sure that we rebuild that. I want to make sure that we continue to grow our committee size. I know that I've seen on Senate, the larger the committee, the more it can do, the more people you have, the more free time that you're going to be able to put into building projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chip?
Yeah, I think that, like I highlighted in some of the questions I was answering, I have the experience, I have the knowledge that it takes to, be president of the union. I was a club officer for a year. I've served on the executive board. I know the struggles that club officers go through when they're forming budgets, how to navigate union policy, and I know the struggles that the executive board goes through to make sure that clubs are getting everything that they need. My time as a club officer, it was a pretty unique club since it's a service organization for clubs, throughout the union. I've been working with a multitude of club officers for almost 3 years now, I already have the skills, I already have the relationships with other students that it takes to really build, an effective, level of communication between the president of the union and the student body. And I also, understand what it takes to form an effective executive board and to accomplish the goals that I've set forth. I think that there's a lot of issues surrounding the union right now, particularly to do with the director of the union position and our inability to communicate with the administration, or rather their inability to communicate with us. But I think that, given that these are things that the president of the union should be doing as a day-to-day job, you should be focusing on hiring a new director of the union. You should be focusing on assisting new clubs. You should be focusing on forming new clubs and making that process effective. I think having a vision for ways to improve the union in other aspects and having the leadership experience to make those goals happen is very important for selecting the next president of the union.
Thank you. Shannon?
I would like to be your next president of the union because I think my unique perspective, coming from a union that piqued my interest in Leeds, United Kingdom, and then working towards a sister union with the former director of the union, which fell through because he left, but we need to keep working towards improving the future of the union as a whole. Every major emergency with the union does pass, and Chip's right with that. And our goal is to be the chief financial officer. We need to make sure that the UAR is clear and comes out on time, and students know what a UAR is. We need to make sure that the budgeting is done fairly and in the right manner and all budgeted correctly. And we need to try to spearhead Summer Arch because that will be a huge project for the next president of the union and the Grand Marshal. And I think recognizing the issues at hand is your first obstacle. And my year on the executive board has really prepared me for this office.
Thank you. Liam?
So I'll just restate my platform again. So the administrative transparency stuff, everyone's already, it's the same stuff every time. I want to improve the way new clubs get money. It takes way too long in the current process. So for certain clubs, I think it's worth taking the risk to give them the money. And I want to create a committee to oversee the development of the new clubs because as it stands right now, with the new club being instituted into the union, the e-board interaction slows down until you can actually get the budget. Improve undergraduate, graduate interaction by having more programming dedicated towards getting graduates and undergraduates to interact and figure out, information on what's out there, research, projects, or any kind of things that they're interested in, and get a lot of more networking. And then one more point that I neglected to bring up in my initial point was I also want to create more of a conversation on the mental health facilities on campus in order to expand upon that. I heard recently that there's a lot of a lack of services that are available to reduce the amount of stress on campus and not enough faculty to support the thousands of students that are incredibly stressed from RPI.
Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to thank everyone who came out to the 2016 CDTA GMMPU debates. Tomorrow, student elections will take place in the Rensselaer Union Rick Hart Lobby, the DCC, Great Hall, and Commons Dining Hall. A round of applause for our candidates today. And then a quick few thank yous. Once again, thank you to CDTA for sponsoring today's debates, RPI TV for organizing and hosting this event, UPEC Sound and Lights for the sound and lights, and of course the candidates, both GM and PU here today, who volunteered to help make this event possible. Once again, I'm Sonny Sen with the RPI Debate Club, and I wish all of you a good night.